Ko here, and for this little story, I guess it's not a story, it's my opinion, I want to talk about the value of taking lessons with great players or great teachers. And I'll tell you a little story. I was fortunate to be involved with a company that did non-equity tours of Broadway shows, and I did that for about 6 years. And we'd go out for 6 to 8, sometimes 9 months at a time playing the show. And we'd travel the U.S., and it was terrific. So as a result of that, I've been able to go to every state in the United States at least twice, with the exception of 2. It's kind of weird. I never made it to South Dakota, and we never made it to Alaska. But other than that, been to every state and had a great time doing it. And one of the things I did, remember this was before we really had the internet going and cell phones and stuff like that, was whenever we'd get close to a famous player or a famous teacher that I was interested in, I'd make sure that I'd contact them and take a lesson if possible. And so I was able to study from Vince Penzarella, who was, second trumpet New York Phil for 20 or 25 years, Chicago School, and another guy I got close to was William Adam. I got to take a lesson from him. And I always felt I got something out of the lessons from them. And I had always taken trumpet lessons ever since I was in high school, because my father believed in it, and he'd pay for them in the beginning. He wanted me to get better, and so when I studied from Don Hazard, and I got coaching sessions from Johnny Madrid and some of the Mikes I mentioned, Mike Lewis, Mike Baker, Mike Morita, all great players in Hawaii, Ollie Mitchell. When I moved to Los Angeles and I'd go hear a great band, for example, I used to go hear Don Menzo's band at Carmelo's. And I remember that a lot of times it would be Frank Szabo playing lead or Chuck Finley, and I got to hear these guys live for $8 cover. You'd buy a beer at the bar if you wanted to. It was Wednesday nights. I used to go all the time. Gary Foster, I believe, was playing in the sax section. I may have that wrong, but it doesn't matter. It was an amazing band, and I could go for $8 and hear these guys. And one night there was a guy subbing on lead. I didn't know who he was, but he sounded so good. He just sounded amazing. And then he played a jazz solo, and it was like incredible, the same thing. And so at the break, he was at the bar having a beer, and I went up and introduced myself, and it turned out to be Howie Shearer. And I asked him if he taught lessons. He said sure he did. So I took lessons from Howie, and I learned the Caruso method as he had learned it from Carmine. And then later on, Howie and I became great friends, and I studied jazz from him, and I always got a lot out of it. And then I took lessons from Yuan Racy, who'd done thousands of movie soundtracks in this town, and he was about life. Yuan was very interesting. He had had polio as a child, and so as I understand it, he had been in a wheelchair or on crutches since about the age of 10. And my lesson was at 9 a.m. on like a Tuesday morning. I don't know why all my lessons were early, but like 9 a.m. And I'd go there, and because of his disability, he'd have to get up, a few hours before, like I had to get there, because he had to get ready. It took him longer to get ready. And he would always be so happy. You'd walk into your lesson, and he'd go, Ko, how's it going? All right, let's play some trumpet. And he was so enthusiastic and such a great teacher. And one day I remember going in, and I probably hadn't had enough sleep, maybe had a few more drinks the evening before than I should have, and I was feeling kind of out of it. And Yuan lets me in the door and says, hey, Ko, how's it going? And I looked at him and I said, Yuan, I said, I don't get it. I said, how can you're always so happy. Are you ever not happy? I mean, and I had been to his house for Thanksgiving dinner. He invited me over. It was very nice. It was a beautiful time with his wife, and I think his daughter was there. And he's just always so positive and uplifting. And when I asked him that question, and he said, well, he says, I decided a long time ago, wherever I was, whatever I was doing, I could either have a good time or a bad time. And he said, it's more fun to have a good time. So I always do my best to have a good time, no matter what the situation is. I've carried that with me a long time. sometimes not the easiest thing to do, but again, a life lesson coming about because of a trumpet lesson or a trumpet teacher. And I remember I was fortunate enough to take lessons from Bobby Findley, Chuck's brother, and Bobby's an amazing trumpet player at A&M Records for years and years. And again, I don't know why, I had this early, like 8:30 or 9 a.m. lesson. That was on a Wednesday, I remember. And he lived in Pacific Palisades, and I was renting a place in Arcadia. And so for me to be there at 9, I had to get up like at 5:30 and leave at 6 because who knows about traffic, and get there. And it was interesting. I ran into Bobby not too long ago, a few years ago, at an International Trumpet Guild conference, and he was nice and friendly, and we chatted a little bit, and I told him, yeah, I go, man, I said, I love those lessons with you, but man, it was tough being there at 9 a.m. And he goes, yeah, but you were always on time, and that's how I knew you were serious. So if you're going to be serious about the trumpet, you should really take lessons from great players. Nowadays, the opportunity is even greater than me. You don't have to travel around the country or the world to study from these guys. You can take Skype lessons, and I really recommend it. It's worth the money, it's worth the time. I know it's easy and enticing to think, oh, well, there's so many free tips and tricks about playing the trumpet online. I can listen to what, Jim Manley has to say on this and that. I don't have to take a lesson from him. Or I can watch the videos of Lynn Nicholson, and I'll watch his chops and how he's breathing, and I don't need to take a lesson. I really recommend that you take lessons from these guys. And some of the greats you can still take lessons from, and they're not going to be here forever. So I would really, really do it. There are some tips and tricks, that can help you with certain things. But if you're looking for the magical tip to learn how to play the trumpet well, I don't think it exists. There's some alternate fingering things you can get a tip about, like in classical music, on Lemaire or something. Or I remember figuring out Rick James' Give It To Me. If I recall, you can play that whole line with the second and the first valve instead of having to cross over with the A flats and stuff. I don't know, I have to figure it out again. But things like that you can do, take tips and tricks and get them right away. But with really rare exceptions, to watch a video about, the secret of playing high or something, and to get it from that one video. Nah, the guys that are doing it well, there are a very few that were just set up and born correctly to do it, but most of the guys have spent a lot of time figuring things out, and they put a lot of time in on the horn, and you need to do that. And if you study from these guys, you might learn a life story. You might hear some just great crazy gig stories or something, but I guarantee you take a real player out there that's teaching and get some lessons from him, you'll take something away from it. And that's really what I think we do as trumpet players. I dated a really good oboe player for a number of years, and back then, and I assume it's the same way now, an oboe player like that would find a teacher like a Ray Still, and that would be their teacher and that school of thought, and they stuck with them for their whole life, for as long as they were studying. But I don't see that in trumpet players. As trumpet players, I see we study from something from this teacher, and we take something away from it. And then we study from another teacher and take something like this, and then maybe we hang out with a great player and get some ideas from them, which you could call a tip or a trick, I don't know, and we incorporate that. And eventually, as Ollie Mitchell said once, he says, each one of us figures out how to play the trumpet. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about this crazy instrument, is that it is never ending. No matter how well you play, no matter how long you've been playing, you can always learn to play better, and you can always challenge yourself to not only play the instrument better, but more importantly, make better music. And that's what it's about. It's having a great time, making great music, and hopefully, depending on the situation, making some good money at it, if you're doing it for a living or even if you're not. So there you have it. Have a great evening.